Welcome to Deep Dive. I'm Kevin Benedict, and I want to thank all of you guys for joining us today. My guest today from the other side of the country on the East Coast is content strategist and expert around content and the CMO of Acrolinx, Chris Willis. Chris, thanks for joining.
Thanks. Nice to see you, Kevin.
So Chris and I have known each other for many years. He's been on our program here several times in the past, and I wanted to go back to him today as an industry expert because over the last several months, I've talked to so many CMOs and C-level folks, marketing gurus about content. And what I'm hearing from all these guys is content requirements are increasing, especially as people personalize more content. You need variations of kind of the same kind of content based on personas and people in the company and customers and prospects and partners and sales enablement purposes. So different versions of like the same kind of content and things. So it just seems like the demand is going up for content and the complexity continues to increase. So I wanted to go back to the expert, Chris, and really pick his brains about how companies should best manage this. So Chris, now I got you in the spotlight.
Fantastic.
So let's focus today, Chris, on business leaders. With all this complexity, with companies who are managing across the world, so they're multinational, they've got channels all around the world, there's different languages, different content requirements, different products for different segments of the market, etc. How does somebody in the position of leadership there actually get a handle on the content coming out of their company to make sure it's compliant, it's effective, and it's accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish? Where would they start?
It's interesting you used the words get a handle on. We say get our arms around, but that's when you talk to these folks, they literally make the gesture. They make the hands are like, how do I get my arms around this process? Because we talk a lot about customer acquisition and demand and the spend that we put into that. But 50% of most organizations' budget goes into content. And this content is a huge mess. I mean, you've got tens of thousands of authors across the globe creating millions and millions of words. In some cases, we have one customer that's doing 1 billion words a year. And the ability to govern that process, even in the smallest way, still escapes a lot of these companies. It's a huge gap for many of these organizations from a maturity standpoint. And I mean, the easiest example of governance in the creation of content is company name. You're talking to a CMO or a brand owner and you say, look, what if you could make sure that everybody that writes content for you spells the company name right, or uses the right capitalization, or whatever that one little rule might be that would make a difference in the overall process of creation of content. And people light up at that. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, well, now extrapolate out from there. What else do you want to do? How far do you want to go with this concept of governance? Because what we're seeing is that these companies, almost everybody right now, is engaged in a digital shift because they know that it's an essential driver of revenue and profit and growth. And with that digital shift, time is a thing because the next 2 years are really going to separate the digital winners from the people that are left behind. And that creates a time to market requirement, right? So I need these things and I need them now. You add to that the fact that most of our customers in the Fortune 1000, 5000 are managing a transformative customer experience initiative. And I think, if you look at the numbers, and Forbes had an article earlier this month, 81% of executives believe that their companies are going to compete solely on experience over the next few years. So that leads to a consistency issue. How do you say the same things in the same way, in the same voice, and then tailor that, like you said, personalize that to the audiences that you're speaking to? And finally, I mean, we're talking about big companies here. Thinking about brand, tone, clarity, and specifically as it applies to M&A activity. Mm-hmm. So I met with a CMO earlier in the summer, told them a little bit about what we do, explain that, we would take his content strategy, his brand strategy, take it right off the whiteboard, make it actionable, allow him to see content versus execution, or strategy versus execution, and then shrink the gap between the two. And he's fantastic. We're being acquired by a French company at the end of the summer. Let's get together right as that's happening. And that's exactly where he sits. Everything's changing in his world, everything. And it's not just flipping the names of the companies. It's the tone that the companies use. He's small American, well, a very large but small American insurer being purchased by a huge French insurer that speaks very differently. And how do you manage that? Because this is a quick, efficient rebrand of everything, and it's got to be consistent, and it's a critical aspect. And what we find everybody has in common is that content's driving the business, right? And content's there specifically in these cases to keep customers happy, keep them engaged, bring in new customers. It's keeping companies compliant. But to your point, it's helping them scale. And this problem of getting your arms around it, it's very real. Adding a layer of content governance on top of this didn't seem like a thing several years ago. Now it's very much a critical aspect of the content creation maturity model.
Got it. So you highlighted some of these, but let's review them together, Chris. What are some of the areas that people would look at, in addition to just the, spell check and grammar? You talked about tone and clarity and brand. How far out do people actually want to have a handle on the content?
So I think, what we're seeing with our customers is all kinds of different use cases. There's, consistent clarity is one. So if you're creating support documentation, for instance, for a website, what's the purpose of that? What's the strategy that's driving that actually? And it's most likely, it's either customer retention, so creating happy customers that have their problem solved. But at the dollars and cents standpoint, it's call avoidance. I'm trying to reduce the amount of incoming phone calls by creating good content. And so now we're trying to create this massive content that allows people to be self-sufficient, that they're able to understand it's written for them at their level of education or usage or technical ability. It resonates with them. It helps solve their problem. So can I create a rule set that allows all of my content authors, all of my subject matter experts to create content that meets that objective? It's going to be useful, it's going to be readable, it's going to be consistent, it's going to leverage the voice of the company or the department. That's the first thing. And we see a lot of that because that's part of that customer experience initiative, right? It's creating a better customer experience over all of our touch points. Most companies in the Fortune 1000 have thousands of web pages constantly being created. How do you tie that together? Not just from a readability standpoint or a consistency standpoint, but from a findability standpoint. Because when you look at the statistics, one of the biggest issues with content and content spend is that content ends up being too difficult to find. So it's out there, I've created it, put it out in the world, but nobody knows it's there because it's not findable. Can I make it so that, can I write my content with findability in mind? Can I write all of my content in my company's brand voice? So think about companies that are differentiating based on brand. So we have a customer, it's in the CAD space, CAD design space, and they're looking to differentiate on brand. They want to have a voice, a tone, and a space in the market that's recognizable, that represents them as a company, and it draws customers in, keeps customers longer, provides that level of customer satisfaction. And so how do you govern tone of voice, the words you use, the terminology behind it, the sound bites and the messages that feed into that? And how do you do that across all of your internal authors, but also all of your external authors? Because all these companies have external agencies creating content as well.
We have these interviews, we publish the interviews, and then different people in the company create the titles and the captions and things like that. And I have to go back and say, that's not the central part of our video.
Mm-hmm.
Let's make sure that when we describe the video, we describe, so the content is a challenge for everybody, especially if you have different people doing different parts of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, so the way that this sort of works in any organization, right, is that you've got this content team that's tasked with creating something, and they're super excited about it. They don't actually have the ability to write it, though, and that's the subject matter experts. And what we're seeing, time was when there was authors, that you were hiring writers, but that doesn't happen as much anymore. Your writers now are your subject matter experts. They're product marketing, they're actual developers. There are any number of people throughout your organization that are creating content, and they're smart as heck, but they're not writers. So they have the concepts, and they throw it on paper, and then they hand it over to the copy editors. And these guys look at it and they're like, it's good, but it's very hard to read. And our audiences, and now we start to think about personalization, our audiences aren't going to understand this. And our audiences could be one or many. I also have access to these external authors and content improvers, and they can help, but they're expensive. And so now I'm sort of in a feedback loop. I'm in this cycle of subject matter experts to copy editors, and we're trying to improve this to a point where it's understandable, it's able to be personalized, resonates with our authors, and reflects sort of the style and the voice and the tone of the company. And now we send that off to the stakeholders, right? So this goes to the folks in the organization that are going to say, yeah, I think this is good. And that's not what they say, literally ever. They do start with, I think, but it's, I think I'm smarter, I think I know more, I think I have better ideas. And now we're in the next feedback loop, and we're stuck here for a while we try and get agreement with people that are very important and have titles. Finally, we get to a point where we're like, okay, we got something. This is an interesting piece of content. Cool. Have you shown it to legal yet? Next process. We need to go through legal because we are a Fortune 1000 company, and we have rules, and we have compliance and regulatory issues that need to be addressed by our legal team. And now we're in the next cycle. And so we're taking time away while we're waiting for legal to do this. While we're doing this, the content team back at the beginning, they're sitting there tapping their foot saying, we need to get this. Demand is waiting for this. Somebody's waiting for this content. A couple things happen as a result of this process. One is it's likely that the original story is lost. More likely that by the time it reaches the end of the process, it's not relevant anymore. So what we're hearing and what companies like Serious Decisions are saying is that 56% or more of enterprise content is never used. It just goes to waste because it's not timely anymore. It's not relevant. It was really cool in February, but when you delivered it in August, it's not a thing anymore.
Right.
And so the process needs to be streamlined. And I think that's the number one challenge that we see within our customers. Now, we solve a lot of problems for people, and we talked about several of them already, but the velocity, the breaking down these editorial bottlenecks and getting content to market faster. When we talk about digital shift, when we talk about customer experience, when we talk about rebrand, all of those are critical and time-based. And in order to be successful, you need to have things created in a reasonable amount of time. And
oh man, Chris, I thought running a business was complicated already, but now you've just scared me to death.
Well, don't go run a 1,000-person writing team.
I was with the company yesterday and interviewing one of their top leaders in marketing who said they have over 1 million SKUs. And they're multinational. They're dealing with probably 100 different languages of content. And so that's big enough, right? 1 million SKUs, so 1 million descriptions, 1 million everything, then multiple languages, different cultural meanings behind different words. And then it occurs to me there's a lot more than just text-based, right? There's audio, there's video, there's, where do you guys set the limits from within what you guys are trying to manage?
I mean, we work with the written word, but the written word feeds into all those things. So one of my customers recently said, we're dealing with TV commercials, we're dealing with billboards, we're dealing with banner stands inside our branches, we're dealing with website content, we're dealing with the materials that we give away at the counter. All of those need to sound like us. All of those need to be clear and easily readable. All of those need to be translatable. And that's where we're real strong, is the ability to take all of that, regardless of where it's going to end up, and make it strong source content. So when you talk about translation and having hundreds of languages you need to support and local terminology, one of the things that we do, so we're not a machine translation solution. That's not what we do. What we do is create source content that can be translated easily, because we take out all of those things. We take out fuzzy buzzwords. We take out local colloquialisms. We make it straight source content and allow it to be translated for less dollars, because it's less words and because it's less complicated. And then if you want to run it back through your voice filters in foreign languages, you can do that and add back in your personality. But in the case of support content, for instance, that needs to be translated, voice isn't as important as readability. So taking out, I write the way I speak and I say crazy things all the time. It's not easy to translate. So the first thing that Acrolinx would do for my writing is pull all the me out of it and make it easy to understand. What are you really trying to say? And that's going to cut 50% of the words that I use. I use a lot of words. I don't know if anybody's picked that up yet if you're watching, but I use a lot of words. And we're going to cut that in half. So what we did was we just cut the bill in half too, because we're paying on a per word basis for manual translation, for human translation. And that adds up to real money. And that's the business case at one of our biggest customers, is they set out at the beginning of the year to cut back the amount of words by 50% with an expected savings of $8 million in that year. And they hit it. They actually exceeded it. And I mean, it's not the most exciting, glamorous business case, but $8 million is.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a real savings. I'm not a math guy. It's a huge ROI.
It sounds like it. So I brought a problem, I've been hearing about this problem, so I brought it to you. Now you just scaled that problem to be huge. How does it get resolved? What does that actually look like? Somebody went out there and say, Acrolinx, make this the best practices kind of environment. Mm-hmm. What would you do? How does it, how would you actually implement this kind of strategy and this kind of solution?
So, I mean, I like to think about, because of where I sit in the organization, I like to think about starting from the top. We have many customers that also start from the bottom, from the silos, but the top-down solution is so, I feel like it's so glamorous to think about, is that you have a way of speaking, you have a set of words, you have a terminology directory, you have a style guide that sit at the top of your company. If you're Coca-Cola, you have a tagline, you have a voice in the marketplace, and you know it really, really well. But you also have 10,000 people that are writing things about Coca-Cola inside and outside of your business. So at that very top level, you build your Acrolinx cloud to understand your voice, to understand your terminology, understand your audience's clarity level, and build in messaging right into the terminology directory, so that if somebody writes have a Coke and a handshake, it says, whoa, hey, I think you meant have a Coke and a smile. Do they still say that? Am I dating myself?
I don't know, but I understand your point, Chris.
And so at the top level, it's about building something that everybody can leverage. And then as you drop down into lines of business, you're customizing that based on that top rule set for each use case that's going to leverage the content. So if you think about what, again, the customer experience world looks like, you're looking at all these touch points across the entire customer acquisition, customer retention life cycle. Each one of those groups could have a slightly different way of leveraging Acrolinx based on the type of content they're creating, but they're still leveraging that top level rule set that comes down and says, have a Coke and a smile, not have a Coke and a handshake.
Got it. So talk to us about what the solution actually looks like. Is it a desktop app? Is it a cloud-based feature? Do you import content? How does that work?
Yes, so we are a cloud-based solution. We think very much in terms of what we say is capture, create, and analyze. And what I mean by saying that is, the first thing you do is you open up Acrolinx in your browser, and you run some content. You get an idea of a benchmark of what your content looks like. And we're going to use that benchmark to essentially capture content goals. So content goals look a lot like some of the things we talked about. What is the terminology that you use? And if you don't know it, we can harvest it out of good content. What are the audiences that you create for, and how do you want to create content for each one of those audiences? What does your style guide look like? And let's bring your style guide into the platform. Once we've created this lens through which your content will pass, then it's about going through a full analysis of all of your content to understand the gap between what you just said you want to be and what you actually are. Armed with that information, we can then push out guidance to authors in real time. And that guidance is in the form of a sidebar. That sidebar sits in whatever authoring tool you use.
So I'm using Microsoft
Word, Google Docs, inside your CMS, inside Adobe tools, inside development tools, GitHub, and it allows you to check the content that you're writing, and it gives you back, very simple things like spelling and grammar, but very complex things like this is not the proper messaging, these sentences are too long, your header is incorrect. Into findability, if you intend to be found for these terms, heads up, you're not. It's not the content that you've written. And all of that just lives in the sidebar and presents you back all of your findings. So in real time, you can literally click and replace content in your document and create content that is compliant, that is aligned with the overall strategy. If you are a company that is at a much higher scale, you can automate that process. So we have customers that are leveraging GitHub and doing essentially continuous integration of content creation. So pulling in, checking in content at night, Git is feeding to Acrolinx, Acrolinx is checking and grading, that all of the results come back in the morning, changes are made, and it's checked back in the cyclical cycle. We also have customers that don't use the concept of guidance at all. So we have a company with $1 billion worth of agency business coming in, and they're making agency purchasing decisions based on the performance of those agencies through their Acrolinx score. What type of content are you creating? Is it in line with what we think it's supposed to be? But in any of those use cases, the last stage of this is understanding something that nobody currently understands, which is the performance of their overall content engine. So when we talk about analytics, people get confused because when you think analytics, you're thinking of performance of content. That's great. You already know that. Like, that's what we all know, is how did it do? Did people download it? Did it help me to convert? Did it get people to read my time spend time on my web page? That's cool. I want to be able to answer a different question. Are you getting better at this? What's happening inside the engine? Where are we struggling? So I can understand what parts of my organization are struggling with what parts of our content creation. We're having a huge disconnect in terminology, and it's coming out in our analytics. People are using words now in a different way, and we're pushing back. Should we be pushing back? Am I having regular terminology council meetings to do that? Are we improving our Acrolinx score over a period of time? And if we are, can we correlate that improvement to anything else in our business? Can we look at our CSAT or our NPS and see that as a result of improving our content, we're actually improving our customer satisfaction? And that analytics that we have, that doesn't exist anywhere else in nature.
Wow.
So I was with a pharmaceutical company last week that was looking at their entire initiative is about speeding up their filing process. And one of the most attractive aspects of this was people ask me all the time, are we getting better? Like, maybe we're getting faster, but is the content good? And is it getting better? And we can't answer that question. Now you can. And that was the most exciting part, was I'm trying to prove my job. I can't prove it. Yes.
Yeah, Chris, I'm listening to this and thinking there are opportunities for English majors out there. And all kinds of writers and different language writers, because content is so key to all these different aspects of the business that you're describing here.
Mm-hmm. And it's still, I mean, I like to think about, what this does for us really as writers, editors, and folks in content organizations is this isn't an AI tool that displaces us. This is something that makes us better. So if you're an author and you come across our website and you hear about content governance and you hear about a AI powered editor, that's terrifying. Like, so the Terminator's going to tell me whether I'm a good writer or not. I went to Harvard. I know I am. And that's not what it's about, right? This is about aligning you to the organization. This is about avoiding subjective guidance. This is about an objective view of, is this or isn't this what the company's trying to create? And it allows authors to get support and guidance without attitude, without opinion, without snark. Yeah. I mean, editors aren't the softest, gentlest people in the world. And if I'm an editor, what this allows me to do is actually do my job. I don't have to fix your stupid mistakes. I don't have to fix alignment issues. I don't have to fix terminology problems that I've fixed 1,000 times before. What I can do, wait for this, because this is crazy, is I can look and say, oh, okay, I get what you're trying to say. I think we could say it better, or maybe this could represent us better as a business. I'm looking at the concepts and the content of the content, not just, I got to get this thing fixed and get it off to the next person, because that's what we've become, right? I mean, think about when somebody hands you something to edit. Are you really reading for concept, or are you just trying to make sure it doesn't have obscenities in the middle of it somewhere that are going to surprise people? And we're past that now. Now we're looking at how this actually works. And when you see it in practice, last week, one of our partners had their customer conference and one of our customers spoke. And you look at the progression that they've made as a business, as a content organization. And they went from having, in 2011, 4 editors, and they were creating, I think, in the area of 120 pieces of content, 4 editors. They had 1% coverage of that content with those 4 editors. Today, with automation and with Acrolinx, they're doing thousands of web pages with 0 editors and 100% coverage.
Oh my. That's what keeps running through my mind as I'm listening to you, Chris, is that this helps you scale.
That's the whole story.
Because you might be good in one location and your New York office is really good at it, but what about all the other offices?
Yep.
How does that work in the social media space?
It's social media, it's bots, it's chat support. All of that is, it's completely based on the organization. And you get these authors with their own personalities that are used to, if I'm chatting on my phone, I'm throwing emojis and shortening words. And if you work at a London-based bank, I'd prefer that you not use emojis and not drop the YO and just put you, write real words. And so the ability to check that content before you press send, the ability to check social to ensure that it's on brand voice, which is very important in the social world, before you press submit, that's huge. It's just an extra guideline. It's not a security feature. It's not heavy governance on somebody to make them not who they are. I just got to be me and put my stuff on social. It's not about that. It's about, we're a company, we have a way, we have a voice, and I can make sure that you know it when you're doing things and you take it into account. And that's a big thing for companies right now. We have a bot on our website, and as I was actually programming the bot, I'm running Acrolinx on it to make sure that I'm using our terminology, that I'm using our voice, because if it doesn't, then it's not us.
Oh, you have given all of us so much to think about. Chris, thank you for sharing your expertise with all of us today.
Anytime, Kevin.
Thank you.